Welcome to Feminist Question Time, brought to you by Women's Declaration International, the leading global organization defending women's sex-based rights against the threats posed by gender identity ideology. Many of us have been active feminists in the 1970s or even the 60s. We were not surprised when this new attack on women came along, and we have not changed our analysis. In 2018, we wrote a declaration on women's sex-based rights which lays out a position, and it has been signed by 39,479 people from 160 countries, and it is supported by 547 organizations. To promote the Declaration on Sex-Based Rights for Women, we have volunteer activists, including country contacts from every continent. Please join us. You can also become a member of WDI to help our work by volunteering or donating. You can write to info@womensdeclaration.com, or you can contact us on our website via your country contact. Our program today is, as usual, very interesting. We are very happy to have with us Linda Blade from Canada. She is going to tell us about Olympic-sized bloke with female passport. Where do we go from here? We will also have Emma Bateman from the UK, and she will give us an update on the Green Party. And then we will finish with Jen Kimmel from Ireland. She will tell us about the 10 years since the Irish GRA, the Gender Recognition Act. Linda Blade has a PhD in kinesiology, and she's a former Canadian champion in track and field, and a long-time sport performance coach who has trained hundreds of athletes in 7 countries from 5 to 70 years of age. And as a president of Athletics Alberta from 2014 to 2023, she established sex-based eligibility guidelines. And she collaborated with the journalist Barbara Kay in 2021 in order to write the book Unsporting: How Trans Activism and Science Denial Are Destroying Sports. She also contributed a chapter on sports to the 2023 WDI book Women's Rights and Gender Wrongs. She is also a founding member of the International Consortium of Female Sport, launched in January 2023, and she is very committed, as you can see, to ongoing advocacy that focuses on safety and fairness for female athletes across the globe. So delighted to have you here with us today. Linda, over to you.
So I wanted to kind of review where we've been and then where we're going. So as many of you recall, in 2024, IOC President Thomas Bach made this comment, which was unbelievable in light of the 2 men who were in the women's boxing, and each won gold medals in their respective events. Thomas Bach, in a press conference, literally said, "How can somebody be born, raised, competed, and having a passport as a woman cannot be considered a woman?" In other words, if somebody has a passport that says they're a female, they must be female. And this is just so ridiculous, because many of us know the truth that there are various ways to have identity papers listing that gender or sex that you aren't. But let's look at what's been happening with DSD athletes in particular. If you look at the regions of the world where they have birth certificates, so if you have a registered at birth as a proxy for medical screening, so if you're born in a hospital and you get your birth certificate, normally that would imply that the doctors have done some sort of screening or checkup on the baby. And as you can see, in European region of the Americas, Western Pacific, all above 90% of babies born have been given a birth certificate, which most people would suspect they were checked for genetic abnormalities. But then you start going into Southeast Asia, Eastern Mediterranean region surprised me a little bit, and Africa. If you look at the African region, only 44% of babies actually have birth certificates, which suggests that a lot of babies are born in villages and they aren't screened properly. So it's no surprise that in the history of sport, many athletes that have ambiguous gender or sex sex, let's say, because we want to stick to that language. Ambiguous sex based on the genitals, they are really truly just assumed to be one sex or the other. And most of the time, if it's ambiguous, they're just called female. And then later, when they become an athlete, they have female on their passport. So that's one way where, you know, there's one region of the world where there's a lot of people falling through the cracks in the sense that they aren't properly screened as babies. And they only they discover later in life, after they go through puberty, that they're actually male. And then here's like just a map of the world, some of the areas of the world where it's you can change your gender marker, your sex, on a legal document. In many of the Americas, you can, with no restrictions, change that. You know, if you're male, you can say you're female. It was interesting to note that in Taiwan, it's completely okay to change your sex if somebody made a mistake, let's say at birth. But in Algeria, if you notice in Algeria, you know, once they said Khalef was female, maybe it's not so easy to change the legal document back. But anyway, the very fact that there's a lot of places where athletes can come from where a passport can be designated female, even if a person is male, makes it, it just means that the door is wide open, and there has to be some sort of gatekeeping. The key point here is that any sport policy that stipulates that women or girl as that they are either sex assigned at birth or gender as given on a government document will fail to protect female category. And this has been a big problem in sports. So that was what that comment by President Bach of the Olympic Committee was in 2024. But now, 1 year later, the tune has changed dramatically. Suddenly, in 2025, June 26, 2025, the new president, IOC President Kirsty Coventry, says, it was very clear from the members of the Olympic Committee that we must protect the female category first and foremost. We must do that to ensure fairness. Like, this came as a big shock because Kirsty Coventry was pretty much Thomas Bach's selected candidate over Seb Coe to be the new president of the Olympic Committee. So that's very promising. The question is, what happened in the intervening period to cause this change in tone and messaging? And I would say that it's a lot has to do with what happened. A couple of things that happened on February 5, 2025. There was an executive order by President Trump and the White House, and it is called Keeping Men Out of Women's Sports. Men and boys competing in female sports is demeaning, unfair, and dangerous to women and girls, and denies women and girls the equal opportunity to participate and excel in competitive sports, was one of the comments. And it's a preliminary statement. And then the entire document goes about restoring the meaning of Title IX as a law requiring the equal opportunity of women and girls to participate in sports on the basis of their female sex, not their gender identity. This has implications because, as some of you might not have known, that the next Olympics is in Los Angeles in 2028. So this is going to be in the United States. And one of the things, a couple of the things that are stated in that executive order maybe aren't fully appreciated. So I'm just going to go through this quickly. As part of the executive order, the White House said the president would be in communication with the assistant to the president for domestic policy to communicate with leadership in all major sports at both state and national levels, conveying the intent to have safe and fair sports for female athletes. Well, we know some of the states like California are still not going along, but there's still a big fight about that. And there's a lot of economic pressure now being put upon states that are not complying. But here's the interesting part. The Secretary of State, so there's 3 stipulations and statements in the executive order that involve international things. So the Secretary of State has to interact with UN to express and let them know that there's the expectation to protect a sex-based female sports category in all international sporting exchanges. And the ones that are most important for the international perspective, and this is what I'm speaking to today, I'm looking at the international perspective. The Secretary of State also has to interact with Homeland Security and order and work with Homeland Security to make sure that there is no entry allowed to a man intending to compete as a woman. So if a Caliph wanted to come in, for example, to do some boxing in LA in 2028, he would not be allowed to, which is there's protection at the borders. The Secretary of State also has to interact with the IOC, which is the key point here, to ensure that the eligibility for participation in women's sporting events is determined according to sex and not gender identity or testosterone reduction. So you can see that Kirsty Covington's comment in June, just this past month, had this whole executive order had probably quite a big impact. The other impact was what happened with World Athletics. In March 2025, World Athletics revised the rules on transgender and DSD athletes. The biological sex determination is now going to be undertaken by looking at the SRI gene test that will serve as a highly accurate proxy for biological sex. SRY gene is the gene that codes for the male characteristics on the Y chromosome. And then there's the cheek swab tests that they want to instantiate at in September at the World Championships in Tokyo. The World Athletics, it said in that statement back in March, the World Athletics is considering introducing cheek swab tests for all elite athletes wishing to compete in the female category to determine the presence of the SRY gene, a marker of male biological sex. So I think that we're going to see now, for the first time in 25 years, a major sporting event where the female athletes are going to have to take the cheek swab to verify that they are indeed female, which is like, it's huge. It's what we've been asking for since for a very long time. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing how that works. And the IOC is now going to have to pay attention to how that works and maybe go back to doing that themselves, which is huge. So Kirsty Covington, again in June, said now there's going to be a new consultation, a new working group will be formed composed of experts and representatives from various international federations to create a framework that ensures fairness and inclusion in sport. The primary goal is to develop a policy that protects the female category while considering scientific evidence and medical analysis. So in other words, there were consultations before the year 2000 about getting rid of the cheek swab. There was a consultation around 2000, and it came out in 2003 that castrated males could compete in women's sports. There was another consultation that led to the 2015 policy that said castration is no longer allowed or no longer required. A man just has to live as a woman for a year, whatever that means, and then reduce his testosterone. And then 2021, when the IOC was embarrassed by Laurel Hubbard in the Tokyo Olympics, then there was the consultation of 2021 in August and September, where athletes like Veronica Ivy and all the trans athletes were invited to the table, and we women explicitly asked whether we could be part of that consultation, and they would not let us be part of, at the table. And that's actually what inspired the launch of the International Consortium on Female Sport, where a bunch of us groups of women from 10 different countries now are like, there's an umbrella group, just like WDI is an umbrella group of organizations from different countries. We are the umbrella group that would like to say that we speak for female athletes in policy development. So we are really hoping we can be part of that. And so here we have the International Consortium on Female Sport. And I would say that the desired approach that we're sort of looking forward to having is that whatever policy is developed, we have to stop calling it the transgender policy. The minute you put the word transgender in a sport policy, the focus goes on to the transgender people or transgender advocates. When you have a policy in sport that says, you know, it's just a transgender alone, like a separate policy, that's like saying, because it's an ideology, that's like saying we need to have a Jewish policy if it's a religion, or we have to have a political policy. Like, we have to stop doing policies for special interest groups and get back to the idea that sex is universal. There has to be a universal policy on athlete eligibility, and we have to just stop calling it the transgender policy completely. And so this time around in 2025, our objective is to draft a policy that we want to see that is the universal policy on athlete eligibility once and for all. And then we should bring that to the table and say, this is the policy we women want, and we want you to see this. We want to see this implemented. So this time we're going to be a little more aggressive in trying to say, not only do we want to see it at the table, but we already have a policy document that we feel that the IOC could simply adopt, and it's sex-based. So we're trying to be a little more assertive this time. And some of the women in our group have a personal connection with Kirsty Coventry because they either swam with her as Olympic athletes, or they, you know, they're personal friends through the sport. So there is a certain amount of hope that perhaps we've turned the corner where, you know, some of us or some groups can be involved, and not just the, you know, the subgroup of transgender people who show up at these, you know, international boardrooms and tell everybody what the policy needs to be for their interests. So I think that's very positive and very hopeful and you know, optimistic. Now, this is pretty much my last slide. I just really want to encourage women, because I know that WDI was very generous in lending their support to our movement as the International Consortium on Female Sport, to say that they are behind us with their big group of people and organizations. And I think the way to help is we have to keep up the pressure, because I think the pressure of everybody speaking out, it's become a landslide, and you can see what's happening in the United States. So many people are talking about it now, and it's fantastic, and everybody's allowed to now. Now we have these platforms like SheWon.org and HeWon.org, and we have all kinds of people now listing situations where men and boys are in women and girls sports. And when that happens, it's so helpful to write letters. If you're part of an organization of radical feminists or whatever, but if you're part of, oh, there, we finally got the solution down there. So we got the right letters directly to the IOC and international federations. So let's say World Boxing just happened in May, you know, when World Boxing was going to come up with a cheek swab like World Athletics. There was an enormous amount of pressure by the Algerian Olympic Committee, by all of these typical UN people, to get World Boxing to reverse its statement on saying they would include cheek swabs. And instantly, because of our new links with all these groups internationally amongst us women, many groups instantly wrote letters and emails to World Boxing, and it had a huge impact, and it helped the leadership of World Boxing to not cave in to the trans activists. And people don't realize that it was very close for World Boxing to have to reverse itself again on the cheek swab and on the gatekeeping for the event that was happening in Holland. And they were able to stand strong because they could show the leadership and all of their members, look how many emails, look how many letters we're getting from these women's organizations. The public is on our side. So it's really important to write letters. The other thing is, because of the executive order and because the next Olympics is in the USA, it is actually going to be very helpful if you hear about any male, like anybody in the world who hears about a man in women's sports, let the State Department, you know, Secretary of State, Homeland Security, write letters to them saying, look, there's a man and he may end up being in the United States for an event. You have to give them the heads up, because as much as they say they're going to help safeguard, they do need our help in knowing who's out there and who's about to enter the country. So I think that's a new sort of arrow in our quiver, you know, like to where we could actually identify people now because all these websites are coming up where they are identifying. And then I would say that also donate value in kind where possible. So it's not just money, although that could be, you know, WDI needs funding. All these women's groups need funding. There's a lot of legal action happening in the United States now. They all need funding, but it's more than that. It's, you know, if there's a letter, like I say, to be written, offer your time to write that letter, offer your time to call somebody, offer your body to stand out on the street if there's a protest. There's a lot of ways to you know, also I set up here retweet. There's so many things you can do just to keep the pressure on the IOC to finish this work and make sure that once and for all there's a sex-based policy for women's sports in the Olympic Games. And then once that's in there, a lot of other organizations internationally, right to the local level, are going to start changing their policy because the Olympic Committee did it. And as far as this whole idea of an example of value in kind, I wanted to shout out the Women's Rights Network in the UK. You know, it was just really great to see that they were traveling somehow and they just went right to the IOC headquarters. They walked right in to the IOC headquarter office in Switzerland and they were just talking to people in the office about what women want. I just thought that was fantastic. That's a really good example of things that you can do, and just we need to be bold. And so I would say that there has been a massive improvement in the situation in sport. There's so much work to be done. We're not there yet, but the tide is definitely turning, and you can see that with all of the things happening in the United States and also across the world, and of course in the UK with the Supreme Court decision, and even with these statements now from some of the major international organizations. I would say if we wanted to have a letter writing campaign, FIFA might be our next target, because FIFA is the one sport that hasn't really listened to us yet. So FIFA would be massive, right? If we could get them to change as well. So I just want to say thank you to everybody who's ever done any work on the sport front, and their advocacy and their pressure, because it actually is really working. And I think I wanted to share that good news and say we're not there yet, but it feels like we're getting there, and we're very close to being able to do it.
And now we're moving on to the UK, to Emma Bateman. She's going to give us an introduction on an update on the Green Party. She's a former Green Party member. She sat on the Green Party Women Committee for 3 years running, but being openly gender critical, as she said, paints a green target on any woman in the party. So after multiple suspensions and expulsions, she is now currently taking legal action against the Greens. So very dire circumstances. Sorry for that. So over to you, Emma.
I was originally going to give an update on my court case because, I've got an ongoing court case with the Green Party. But what's happened recently is the Green Party have kind of been stalling that. So I've had 2 hearings that were postponed, and I'm waiting for something to happen with the Green Party at the moment, waiting for them to get back to me, which they take their time over. Anyway, so I thought rather than talk about that, I would give a kind of potted history of Green Party women, because I think sometimes it's easy, you know, we say these things like, oh, Green Party women were attacked, or, you know, this happened, or they were shut down, and we don't quite know the detail of why. And I also just wanted to talk about Green Party women because they've been so strong. You know, we've been attacked in the Green Party for about 5 years, or more than 5 years now. And the target has been Green Party women, because the Green Party is one of the most woke, you know, parties there is. This is the Green Party of England and Wales I'm talking about, not Scotland, which is even worse. So Green Party in England and Wales. It's one of the most woke parties there is. And the only place where we've been able to kind of be gender critical is in Green Party Women, which is supposed to be the women's group, right? So for years they've been attacked and people have tried to shut them down. So a lot of the Green Party women history has been lost. What happens in the Green Party is things get deleted, things get destroyed, you know, and sometimes this happens deliberately. But from what I can piece together, Green Party Women was set up in 2008. And now when it was set up, it was to be a formally recognised voice for women in the party. And the Constitution at that time in 2008 said the membership of the Green Party Women shall be open to any current female member of the Green Party. But they did let men in as associate members, and men could be like come to their meetings and things like that, but only as associate meetings. They couldn't stand for the committee and they couldn't vote. Now in 2008 there was another group called Women by Name, which really was women only. And back then it was said that Women by Name will remain a women-only space to enable and support women, providing a safe and separate space. Now, I have to say, if you said that in the party now, you would be crucified for wanting a women-only space, because where will the non-binaries go? Now, unfortunately, Women by Name disappeared and were soon erased from our history. What happened between 2008 and 2017 is a little bit hazy, but I think Green Party Women was growing. It had an email list for members to sign up to. But in 2016, Amy Challoner, a trans-identified man with a troubled past and a horrific family, proposed that Trans Women Are Women motion. You probably all know this, it's on the screen there, which was adopted by the party, and it's been used to beat women into silence ever since. This is the policy why you can't speak about women in the party. So trans-identified men started to become more prominent in the Green Party Women. And though I was not actively involved then, from what I've heard, their attitude towards Green Party Women was, if we can't have you, no one can. They were determined to either control or destroy Green Party Women. That was what they were after. One member described the takeover of Green Party Women as brutal. At one point, a member tried to take a Green Party Women banner to a Reclaim the Night march, but she was forbidden to do so because the gender woo said that Reclaim the Night was run by transphobes. In autumn 2017, you can see the influence here of the intersectionals here. It was the Constitution was rewritten, and it said that the committee should include at least one member who's disabled, a person of colour, a parent or guardian, someone from the LGBTIQA who would be at least one person who is trans or non-binary, and one person who is not heterosexual, and one person who is under 30, and one person who is over 50. And no, all of these are people, not women. This is for the Women's Committee, right? Now, you see that list. It's hard enough to get anyone to volunteer to be on various committees, but you get this list. This is ridiculous. So, you know, Green Party Women really couldn't exist with this. In 2019, a couple of people were starting to try, you know, a couple of women were trying to grasp Green Party Women back from the intersectionality cult. And they rewrote the Constitution, but they had to keep this stuff in because the Green Party is very woke. A lot of the leading members are very be kind, trans women are women. So the best they could do is that now, to be a member of Green Party Women, if you want to be on the committee or vote, you have to be someone who identifies as a woman or as gender variant. And that is what we are still stuck with today. So you can't even just be a woman in Green Party Women. You have to identify as a woman if you want to get a vote. Now, conversations were going around about what Green Party Women could say on social media at this point. And it was decided that they could only put things on social media that were in line with the Trans Women Are Women policy, which of course meant that nothing on social media around now, this is sort of 2019, nothing on social media could support the gender critical stance. Nobody could put that up there. So this was June 2019 that this happened, this rewrite. I kind of started to wake up and find out what was going on in the Green Party about then. I was a bit slow, and I joined a little small gender critical group in the Greens, and we decided to go to the next conference to see what we could do. So we went to Newport in autumn in 2019. We stood as committee members and we actually got elected. Now, at first, the committee kept our heads down, but in December 2019, we kind of broke cover and we put this post objecting to the use of the term TERF by general election candidates up. Now, the only place we had to communicate with members was our Facebook page. Okay, so we put this on our Facebook page and we got around 700 comments on this, mostly calling us transphobic bigots. But this was actually a bit of a breakthrough because this was one of the few places you could actually just discuss these matters in the Green Party, because everywhere else in the Green Party, you know, you couldn't really talk about any of this stuff. You couldn't talk about it in official groups. You couldn't talk about it on the official Green Party page. If you put something like this up, you'd get totally shafted, really. So then what happened? Yeah, so we had no email list, right? What had happened around, I'm not quite sure when, around 2018 or so, the email list of all the members got lost. So did the Twitter password. So the only way we could communicate was through the Facebook and through something called Green Spaces, which is the internal Green Spaces for members of the Green Party. What we did, I kind of, we were coming into COVID then, and I ran away from it during COVID. I ran down to my allotment to hide from COVID. But Dawn Furness, who was the co-chair, was like a real force, driving force in Green Party Women. And in April 2020, we had an online emergency general meeting and event. So we set up this big event, and we had what we wanted to do. We had a vote. We wanted to make Green Party Women an opt-out rather than an opt-in, so that when members joined the Green Party, if they said they were women, they would be included in Green Party Women automatically. Now, we didn't get that vote through, but we had a brilliant event anyway with loads of speakers. It was really good, and it sort of put Green Party Women back on the map. And then what was funny was Dawn Furness, because the IT crowd then weren't our friends in the Green Party. We suspect that there were a few people there that weren't terribly helpful to us on purpose. But Dawn finally got access to the email platform and she ticked a box and suddenly all our members appeared, which was really quite amazing. We suddenly got like several thousand members that had been lost for quite a while. We were known as TERFs by now, and we were getting a lot of grief for it. Honestly, we were called transphobes and all the rest of it, as probably people here understand. So in July 2020, we sent out a sexism and misogyny survey to ask women about their experiences in the party. Now, this survey, I'm going to hold my hands up and say this survey wasn't brilliant, right? There were a couple of questions that we probably could have phrased a little bit more sensitively, but you know, in the main, it was just asking women for their experiences of sexism and misogyny in the Green Party. Now, this was absolutely jumped on by the LGBT, well, not the LGBT, it's the TQ plus, isn't it? It's not the LGB, it's the TQ plus, the TQs. So they denounced this survey as transphobic. Now, the Green Party Regional Council is a council in the Green Party that's supposed to care about the party's well-being. Okay, it's rather Kafkaesque. It's Orwellian. It's supposed to care about the party's well-being, but actually most of the time it spends its time kind of choosing who to kick out of the party. They had recently set up a group called the EDI Values and Processes Working Group. So the Equality, Diversity and Intersectionality Values and Processes Working Group. Now, they said their purpose was to look at ongoing tensions and internal conflict around contentious topics. So they got in touch with us and they asked us to withdraw the survey immediately and to destroy any responses that we'd already had. We hadn't even closed the survey at this point. It was open for a couple of weeks, but they just got in touch immediately and said we needed to get rid of it and destroy it. And then we received a letter from 13 prominent Green Party women members, including Sian Berry, who was the leader of the Green Party, Carla Denyer, who is the current leader of the Green Party. They're both MPs now, and several other Green Party bigwigs. They wanted us to call an emergency meeting of Green Party women and kick ourselves out from the committee. So we weren't going to do that. So Next, we were told that a letter had arrived objecting to our survey that had been sent to the regional council, signed by 35 LGBTI Greens, who said they were too intimidated to raise this directly with us because a number of our committee members were active on social media campaigning against trans people. And the letter included statements as such as this: the previous Green Party Women Bulletin contained a link to the infamous anti-trans essay by J.K. Rowling, which was enormously upsetting to trans members. So the pressure was mounting, and we pointed out that everything that they shot at us was being done by other groups as well. Right? They tried to say we'd breached GDPR. We showed them other forms from the LGBT Greens and other groups that had used exactly the same template as ours. But they didn't want to know about that. We told them that we'd been called transphobes and everything like that, but they weren't interested. Now, ultimately, they got their way. We didn't publish the results of the survey because we knew they hounded us so much. We knew that they were going to step up and kind of suspend us or expel us or whatever. But it demonstrated to me that they had no real interest in knowing about the experiences of women in the party. They just wanted us to destroy this survey. They didn't even want to know what the answers were. Right, so then we come to the election, which was a year later, December 2020, and this was absolutely horrific. We had to run this election twice through no fault of our own. It was to do with the IT team trying to set up the lists for voters. Not their fault either. And there was such a furore over this election. We had the Green Party leader, Sean Berry, sort of promoting the other slate of the intersectionalities. And we had Amelia Womack, who was the deputy leader of the Green Party, actually stood for the committee. I mean, you know, she's a deputy leader of the Green Party, and she's standing for our little committee that's supposed to be just a sort of small committee in the Green Party. We had an ex-MEP who's a national spokesperson for the party making derogatory comments about us, and it was deeply unpleasant. And we also had to contend with accusations from the Gender Woo that we let men vote in the election. Now, voting was open to anyone who self-identified as gender variant, which meant keeping men out was actually an impossibility. So in the report of the election, the ERO, the Election Returns Officer, stated after the election, equal standards of democracy need to be applied across all groups in the party. Green Party women has been the subject of scrutiny and disciplines not applied to other groups. You know, it's absolutely clear we've been treated like that, and we're still waiting for them equal standards to be applied. So in January 2021, we finally had a new committee. I was elected as co-chair alongside Catherine Bristow, a trans-identified male who insisted he was female. Now, the majority of the committee were trans activists at this point. There'd been quite a lot of publicity over this election, and the Daily Mail ran a story about how women were leaving the party because now we had a man in charge of the women's groups. Now, as I say, Catherine Bristow said he wasn't only a woman, he was female, okay? And he told people to write, at the time the national census was on, and he told people that he was putting female on the national census as his sex, and told other people to do it too. And now I refused to endorse the notion that Catherine was a female, so two of the trans activists on the committee put in a complaint and I was suspended. I was put on a no-fault suspension for 5 months, during which time the trans activists shut down Green Party women completely. Catherine Bristow removed the ability for members to comment in the internal Green Party women members space and deleted all the posts and comments there. And the entire Green Party women email archive was also deleted. Now, oddly enough, the Green Party Regional Council didn't have anything to say about this and were apparently entirely powerless to do anything about it. So after 5 months on suspension, I sent the newly minted Mayor Forstater ruling to the Green Party Regional Council and pointed out that suspending me for not agreeing that males are females might put the Green Party on a sticky wicket, legally speaking. So I was taken off the no-fault suspension, but warned that they could resuspend me any time if I was unkind. Now, the Green Party Green Party trans activists kicked up a big fuss when I was unsuspended, And they said it was unsafe for Catherine to interact with me. I don't know what I was supposed to do to him over Twitter, you know, middle-aged woman over Twitter and Zoom, but apparently it was unsafe and he shouldn't have to interact with me in any way. So they went on strike, but nobody noticed because they hadn't done anything for months anyway. And here is a couple of examples of what we had to put up with. So this was Catherine Bristow. It was decided, I said, look, you know, we're at an impasse. I'll go to mediation so we can kind of have a mediator to talk about this stuff. And he said that he would agree to go to mediation with me if I said that he was not a woman. Oh, no, sorry, that he was a woman, that he's not male, and it was fine for him to be on the committee. And until I said this, he refused to go to mediation. Now, obviously, I didn't say this stuff. The other thing, you know, it wasn't only him, we had other people on that. So this was when we were trying to run the next election. This was another trans activist. I wrote the equality and diversity form, and I separated the questions into sex and gender. 2 questions. This is what they thought about it. It is extremely toxic to separate sex and gender on an E&D form. It will be a huge risk to the party and our reputation as a progressive women's organisation just by separating the 2 questions into sex and gender, honestly. Anyhow, we finally sorted out the election and the new committee was elected in January 2022. I stood again as co-chair, and this time my fellow co-chair was a non-binary woman called Annie Stafford Townsend. We held our first committee meeting on the 3rd of February, and on the 4th of February, I was suspended again after a complaint by Amelia Womack, the deputy leader of the Green Party, obviously for transphobia and bigotry and everything like this. Now, thankfully, at least this time we had a majority of gender critical members on the committee. Unfortunately, Annie Stafford Townsend and the gender woosters were every bit as vindictive, controlling and authoritarian as the last lot. Annie Stafford Townsend, because she was now the only co-chair, removed all the other admins from the Green Party Women members space, leaving herself in sole charge, which meant that posts calling people transphobic bigots were allowed to stay, while posts and comments espousing a gender critical stance were censored. She had sole control of the access to the members' email list, so nothing could be sent out unless she chose to send it. Now, I was suspended for a long time, and eventually another gender critical member, the excellent Tina Rothery, who some might know from anti-fracking movements, she's brilliant, Tina, I really love her, she was allowed to be co-opted onto the committee. Now, the gender woosters made the usual accusations of bullying, transphobia, but they could not control everything. So the end of June 2022, all the 3 trans activists on the committee had an orchestrated flounce out.
I'm going to ask them, what would you like to say?
I'm going to play this one.
Essentially, I was messaging Nicola from pretty much the beginning of...
this is about a minute and a half long, so...
misgendering is a really big issue within the Green Party. I personally have been misgendered by members of the Green Party Women Committee at present, and the fact that I repeatedly messaged Nicola saying, can that be called out, as Annie was repeatedly being misgendered, and the only thing that was called out was that an email had been sent out several minutes.
Okay, I'm really sorry.
I'm sorry, I've been given a minute to speak.
Oh, okay, go ahead. I'm apologising.
Non-binary and gender diverse people are constitutionally part of the Green Party Women, and it is absolutely heartbreaking that we have been completely and utterly ignored by the current committee. The fact that the members of the committee, everything is only the women, only the women, only the women we care about, only the women that are our constituents, essentially. But it's not only, it's people like me who are non-binary and gender diverse, who have a lot of the same issues as women, cis and trans. And it is incredibly heartbreaking that you don't seem to care about us in any way.
Okay, accepted, Kate. Thank you very much for your input. And I will ensure I try to gender Annie correctly, although I can't for the life of me remember what that gender is. I'm sorry.
Okay, so that made me laugh. That made me laugh. And what made me laugh about that was, right, that was actually put out by the trans activists because they thought that would show them in a good light and show how terrible Green Party Women was for kind of like this horrible misgendering. This is, and I also put out, like, I feel a bit odd putting out clips sometimes because to me that doesn't show her in a very good light. But Kate Hatton is very powerful in the party. She's, you know, on a lot of committees. She's quite a powerful person in the party. And as they put that out themselves, I thought it was fair enough to use it. Anyway, but this, and it also gives you an idea of this kind of thing. This is what we had all the time, you know, all the time. Anyway. So where am I? So the constitution of Green Party women was still not fit for purpose, but it had been impossible to push through any big changes because the gender war would have just blocked it. So, but now the committee wrote a new constitution because they're all gender critical because all the others had flounced out, which addressed a lot of the problems. Now, among the other things they were trying to change was to change the voting rights from members who identify as women or as gender variant to just women. Because although it would still include trans women, because trans women are women in the Green Party, but it would have given us an opportunity to stop the gender variance from voting. Now here's, you know, we've got these people that you can see on the slide. This is what we had to contend with all the time. These kind of, these guys who were proud Green Party women members. Now, it was quite amusing when we set up this new constitution to see all the non-binaries and trans men vehemently arguing why they should still be in Green Party women, despite rejecting the idea that they were women. You know, they didn't, because they wanted to control it. So they knew, they just wanted to be there to control it. Now, the vote for the constitution required 2/3 majority to pass, 66%. Sadly, we almost made it with 64%, which was a bit gutting, really. But it showed that while we were always told that we were a tiny, tiny transphobic minority in the party, and that there was only a few TERFs in the party, we could show that was rubbish now. We got almost 2/3 of the vote. Okay, then we held the next election. And at the next committee, Zoe Hatch was elected alongside a trans activist called Cheska Walton. This is how our elections worked. We always had one gender critical person and one sort of trans activist when they stood, because of the way that the voting works in Green Party women. So, as before, the trans activists tried to break Green Party women with accusations of bullying and transphobia, and Cheska submitted a multitude of complaints about gender critical committee members. I believe it may have been about 14 complaints in all about other members of the committee. Now, in April 2023, the Equality and Human Rights Commission sent a letter to the UK government regarding the legal definition of sex under the Equality Act 2010. Now, in response to that letter, basically the letter sort of said, you know, oh, you know, we need to have proper conversations about sex and gender. In response, Green Party women posted the following tweet thread to their Twitter account. Green Party women welcomes the EHRC calling for the public debate on issues of sex and gender to move to a more informed and constructive basis. We in Green Party women have differing views on this topic, but are committed to well-informed and respectful discourse on the subject. Those of us who support single-sex spaces recognise it's important for the meaning of sex to be clarified so that the Equality Act 2010 can be correctly applied as it was originally intended. We feel it is vital for female safety, dignity and fairness that they are protected on the basis of sex. Green Party Women is clear that this new information from EHRC should not leave trans people without legal protection from discrimination. We will continue to monitor the announcements from the EHRC and to show our support or disagreement as the conversation continues. Right. Now, I think that's quite a reasonable statement, but I have to say the trans activists were furious. They were mad at Green Party women for posting this moderate tweet thread, which didn't break any party policy, and the Green Party Regional Council were outraged, and they called 2 emergency meetings over the blatant transphobia and reams of disrepute in these 3 tweets. And they wanted gender critical heads to roll. At first, they were going to expel all of the gender critical members of the Green Party men just for putting up these tweets. In the end, they didn't do that, but, you know, they got a few of them. Right, so in August 2023, there were so many women expelled from the Green Party, and it was so impossible to discuss women's rights that we set up the Green Women's Declaration. I wonder where we got that inspiration from, eh? This was a campaign group set up by women from the Green Party, and the Green Women's Declaration supports the work of Green Party women, and lots of women are in both of them. You know, we totally support Green Party women. The trans activists were not happy that we'd set up the Green Women's Declaration. And in October, in October 2023, I'd been expelled from the Green Party off and on. I've been expelled 3 times. And I was waiting to hear from my latest appeal, and they'd taken weeks and weeks to send it to me. So I thought, I'm going to go to the October conference. I'm going to stand outside. I wrote some leaflets, and I stood outside and leafleted and protested. Then we bought the Green Women's Declaration banner outside, and we just stood outside conference with this rather splendid banner. Now, Cheska Walton, the trans activist co-chair of Green Party Women, I'm not playing the clip of this, but she walked up to the banner, she took one look and tore it down. You know, she just physically ripped it down and said it can't be there, and she was completely outraged that we were there. Oddly enough, she was not suspended from the party for this. You know, you can get suspended from the party for misgendering, you know, or for saying men aren't women, whatever. But walking up to a banner, tearing it down, she wasn't suspended. So then what happened was, after conference, the Gender Woo called for an emergency general meeting to get rid of gender critical members of Green Party women again. This, you know, the way they acted didn't seem to change very much. And they called us things, you know, they were sort of saying about Green Party women, we created a hostile atmosphere. This one made me laugh, that people involved in sex work have found themselves unable to attend Green Party women meetings for the fear of intimidation, bullying, harassment and discrimination. Perhaps I've got a naive view of people in sex work, but I would have thought that some of those people have more to contend with than being misgendered. Anyway, but perhaps that's a bit of a thing to say about sex work as a whole. Anyway, so in 2024, we had another election. Oh yeah, so Zoe Hatch was suspended, and then she was expelled a little while later. And again, Zoe Hatch, an amazing woman, amazingly strong woman, helped set up the Green Women's Declaration, absolute driving force. And the party are mad to throw us all out. Anyway, so what happened then was in November 2024, Green Party Women, the CEO, removed Green Party Women's access to the membership list, and the Standing Orders Committee disaffiliated us. We were never given a reason for this, an adequate reason for this. They just so basically they just tried to shut us down. So this was then the election. The Gender Woo didn't stand because by then they'd all gone off and made their own intersectional group, but they still kept complaining about us. And in March 2024, Jude English, the gender critical co-chair, was suspended, and then she was expelled in June 2024. Now, and then another gender critical co-chair of Green Party Women, Siobhan Scanlon, at that point was the sole remaining gender critical member of the 2023 committee. She has just been suspended for that tweet from the EHRC that we put up earlier. Siobhan was suspended for those tweets, even though she didn't write the tweets and she didn't post them, but she's been suspended for them now. I'm not going to say much about the current committee because I wrote this late last night and I haven't asked their permission to name them or anything. But I'll just say these are the members that were expelled or suspended just from the gender critical side of the committee between 2019 and 2025. We've got loads more Green Party women members who were suspended. You know, I think it's now 7 gender critical co-chairs of Green Party women have been suspended or expelled from the Green Party. And, you know, now, some people ask, why on earth do we still care about the Green Party? Now, I care because of these eco-feminist warriors and their spirit and their strength to keep fighting. In the changing climate of the Green Party, the greenwashed, brainwashed social justice warriors seem to have put global warming on the back burner, as environmental concerns are pretty low on the list of priorities, and they come just above women's rights. But Green Party women are not fighting for women only. They want to save the whole bloomin' planet, which is a pretty big task and one I fully support.
And now we're going to hear from Jen Kimmel. Jennifer is a trans widow and a campaigner for women's rights, and she's based in Ireland. So her intervention is called 10 years since the Irish GRA, the Gender Recognition Act. So thank you very much for being here with us, Jen, and over to you.
In 2015, Ireland became the first country in the world to approve same-sex marriage by popular vote, with a result of 62% for and 38% against. We were all so happy. I remember being so happy myself, and I did not know at the time. But shortly after, on the back of this popular legislation, Ireland granted people the legal right to lie about their sex via the Irish Gender Recognition Act. Gender recognition certificate can be acquired by filling out a form that you can find online, a very short form, 2 pages, I think, and a solicitor signs it, and you pay €5, and that's it. And you can change your name at the same time, and the normal weight and fee for the deed poll is waived. And the Trans Equality Network Ireland played a pivotal role in the drafting of the GRA. TENI, we call them TENI board member Adrian Aoife Martin later bragged that it somehow slipped under the radar. It's important to note that while TENI, Trans Equality Network Ireland, tries to put on a diverse face with a couple of trans-ID'd women and a non-binary demisexual bearded femme man on its main webpage, the organization has always been headed and populated by middle-aged and up fetishist ex-husbands and fathers. Some of them have been imported from the US and others from the UK, even though TENI uses anti-USA and UK rhetoric in their activism, but it'll recruit men from those countries if they are sufficiently misogynist and promote the targeting of children with TQ plus ideology. TENI's influence on the GRA is most apparent when you consider how punishing the act is to women. So while trans rights activists see Ireland as the gold standard of self-ID and claim no woman has been adversely affected, this is not true. Not for incarcerated women, not for women victims of rape and other male violence, and certainly not for the wives of the full-time fetishist men who avail of GRCs. I'm one such women. We're called trans widows. So our husbands and ex-husbands have chosen to indulge a cross-dressing fetishist full-time, regardless to the expense to others. And the circumstances for trans widows in Ireland is grim, and it was set up to be so. So while women in the UK are somewhat protected by the spousal exit clause, in Ireland, the requirement for applicants to obtain a divorce before getting a GRC was swiftly removed. So the wives of men who obtain a GRC are never informed at any stage of the process, and nor do we have any way to find out whether a GRC was obtained. So my ex-husband says he has one, but he's not really big on truth, and I don't know. I've been trying to find out, and there is no way that I can find out. So we can't plan for the future. We have no idea how it's going to affect us legally or financially or our kids in the future. And we can be sorting it out would be prohibitively expensive for most of us, because a very common method of abuse employed by our spouses or ex-spouses is financial abuse. Most of us are left with very little to try to get on with our lives. And with that, getting on with our lives is made as difficult as possible in Ireland. Trans widows are a threat to many because we can blow the trans thing wide open. We know exactly what's driving it, mostly male entitlement and porn. We've seen it, lived with it, and suffered under it. We know these men are formidably networked and have been for some time. We know they work behind the scenes with government like they have in Ireland. Trans widows tend to employ very straightforward language and have learned very strong boundaries because we know exactly where compromise leads. So the men of TENI and their ilk did everything they could to make sure that no one would ever hear from ex-wives or children of these men. A few years after the big sneak of 2015, which is what I call it, when Irish women's voices were beginning to be heard above the trans activist lies, groups like Amnesty Ireland and the National Women's Council of Ireland, and on the board of 4, there's one man who is also was on the board of TENI. We call him Big Dave. Groups like Amnesty and the National Women's Council and individuals like the chairs of Women's Aid Ireland, which is supposed to help women who suffer domestic violence, and Sligo Rape Crisis, signed a letter calling on media and politicians to no longer provide legitimate representation to women who question or criticize self-ID. So trans widows already disenfranchised and our allies were even further silenced. And all these people and organizations have doubled down since recent events with the Cass review in the UK, and things are happening rapidly in the US, and they continue to try to not only silence and vilify women, but use threats of violence against those of us who refuse to comply. And like most victims of domestic violence, trans widows get little to no help from the police, and Ireland's Garda Síochána are no different. I asked for help many times over the years, but got none. I was laughed at by male officers more than once when I tried to describe my situation, but the guards wasted no time landing at my front door a couple of years ago when a couple of local men complained when I tried to raise child safeguarding concerns about a BDSM furry cross-dressing fetishist from Tenny. They invited him to town for a tea and chat about the benefits of medicalizing LGBTQIA++ children. So the police came to my door to tell me off for that, but they never helped with my ex. Anyway, recently it was announced that Tenny and its close associates belong to will push Tenny's agenda in Irish schools and youth groups will be funded through Ireland's national broadcaster RTE on a long-standing, cherished family Christmas program, the Late Late Toy Show. It's designated to fund a number of children's charities, yet the largest part, over €55,000, will go to Tenny and belong to. And still many in Ireland have no idea who's behind Tenny. And I try my best to let them know. I talk about Big Dave, father of 3. I talk about Tara Hewitt, the BDSM fairy fetishist brought over from the UK. And I talk about Dermot Breen, who's a Tenny board member who shared a cartoon that made fun of the fact that Dr. Cass is afraid to travel on public transport. He thought that was funny. I talk about Big Kevin, he must be 6'3" or 4, who said that cis women need to deal with TERFs, not just trans-identified men. And by deal with them, he means make them terrified, their lives in misery. Holding their hand doesn't work. Trust us, they made their choice. They need to be smashed out of existence. These are the men from Tenny. Another man, Sean, he's American. He's back in America now, but when he was here, he helped Tenny target children and frame men like himself as victims. He likes to share pornified cartoons with girls in pigtails, supposedly representing himself with bludgeons to beat women who won't comply. It goes on, but it's mostly married fathers, ex-husbands that are behind Tenny. I don't think people realize that, and certainly Tenny does not make that clear. There are some organizations trying to get a foothold in Ireland and they don't operate on a feminist or safeguarding principles, and they would have us believe that this is a complex issue with the toy show. And it isn't. It's paraphilic men are openly predating on children via a Christmas toy program, and our government is not only behind them, but helping to fund them. And Ireland is in a crucial place right now, influenced as it is by what's happening in the UK, in the US, in Europe. There's been a decided shift to straightforward language, and Ireland must tap into this. There's no need for compromise or a one-step-at-a-time approach. We really don't have time for more gender gibberish that simply muddies the waters and perpetuates what we claim to be fighting. Those of us who resisted call it gender shite. We don't need any more gender shite. We're done with it. It's like trying to go forward with square wheels while everyone else is using round. When it comes to women's rights and boundaries and child protection and safeguarding, clear, accurate, accessible language that cuts through the noise is essential, and we cannot protect children while compromising the boundaries of women on behalf of predatory men. And my experience of abuse is one of the reasons why I resist so strongly the idea that protecting children from trans, gender, TQ, whatever, can be achieved without protecting the rights and boundaries of women. Strong boundaries are the most basic way we have to keep kids safe. A lot of these men hate women because we stand between them and the kids. When the boundaries and rights of their mothers are compromised or trampled more slowly, when women are dismissed as extremists or ultras or rad femmes or activists or whatever, our kids are more vulnerable. Women are the first line of defense they have against predators, and we can't protect kids by sidelining or vilifying women while throwing the doors wide open to those that want to argue that essential boundaries are up for debate and safeguarding is nothing more than an inconvenience. These trans rights activists will say it's about a balance of rights, but it isn't. It's about power and domination and controlling and wasting women's time to keep us running in place, to wear us down. And the paralysis that results from this might be profitable for some who insist that resistance is useless or shameful or somehow fragile. But our hands aren't tied, and we can say no loudly and clearly for as long as it takes, and we will. But on a more positive note, I want to talk about Not All Gays Ireland. It's a relatively new group of young lesbians, gays, and bisexuals that are working together to highlight and champion the experiences, rights, and protections of lesbian, gays, and bisexual people in Ireland. And they recently held an amazing conference. They had people from all over. They had Sel Grover piped in from Australia, and they had people from the UK, from Scotland, from America, and they talked about a whole range of things. They talked about child safeguarding. They talked about surrogacy. I spoke as a trans widow and the effects of the Gender Recognition Act. And these young people are the way forward. I can't tell you what it means to me because I have kids their age who are variously captured still. And to see these young people fighting against this in Ireland is huge for me. And they are brilliant. The head is a lesbian woman called Annie Birdie, and her partner, not her partner, her co-head is Sean Hutchinson, a gay man, and they are really the way forward in Ireland, and I have so much hope because of them and what they're doing. So look them up. They're on Twitter as Not All Gays, and they truly are brilliant. And that's me, I think. Thank you.